See and Jesse, and then I'll go to you, Larry.
Well, we did a video yesterday, Marshall, about the update. We had started tracking. What was strange about it is after the show last weekend on the 18th, some of our YouTubers immediately noticed the object coming in on our stereo A images from SETI with the naval satellite.
Right.
So we did an update. We have been updating it since the 18th. So in New Mexico, we had two astrologers on the 22nd decide to break out their telescopes, and they did 2-day imaging from the 22nd and the 23rd there.
Jesse, is that astrologers or astronomers?
Excuse me, Marshall. It's been a long day. It's astronomers. Excuse me. Thank you for.
That's how you pronounce it.
Look, keep me straightened out. Things are happening so fast. Yeah, exactly. Two astronomers. Now, and what they did was they did 2 days of snapshots so they could compare movement. And that's how you do it. You have to compile the images and look at the change in motion with the star field behind you. And what they did was detect a gas cloud, and they put it up on Space Weather. We put a video up about it, and they showed the movement of the gas cloud. It had the blue halo in it, and it was tracking with the JPL model. And so they determined that it was the remnants of Elenin. And so, but now the object we're tracking on stereo on the A satellite actually has it's not just a gas cloud. It has a interior solid mass. And what they did today was come back with those same images in the infrared spectrum, Marshall, and it was showing that the gas cloud was short on one end and fat on the other, just like the wingtip of a plane, like you would see. In other words, it was tapering back from one end. So it's detecting there is an object there. And so we're tracking, keeping that updated, and it's right there. You can go and look at it for yourself.
All right. All right. And Larry Prescott of the Elenin Research Team. And Larry, I know you and Ed have really been busy with chit-chat and following on all this. What have you got?
Well, I think this is interesting in that it reckons back to when I worked with Ed and Richard, and we were all talking and predicting about this gas and the type of gas that was going to be around Elenin. And I believe it was Richard or Ed pointed out that it was going to be hydrogen cyanide. Do you remember that? Mm-hmm. And anyway, and so now, and then I'm looking at Jesse's video, and he's saying the same thing. He's pointing out the hydrogen cyanide. Jesse, I don't know if you knew that when we were all talking about this back then, but I find it interesting now that that's
where I got the information from, Larry.
Well, very nice, thank you. But anyway, it's kind of cool to see that in one sense come to pass. And now the other thing, it's kind of interesting to see if it happens, is what Jesse was referring to in the the electrical nature of it. That how if it could illuminate, not necessarily a big explosion, but an illumination. And I'm just kind of curious if that might be a bright blue. But again, we'll see. But the most interesting thing I want to throw out real quick, guys, is that I just find it so interesting that on November 8th, that asteroid comes within, what, 200,000 miles of Earth, like within the moon orbit, and just kind of like no fanfare or whatever. YU-55?
There's not much fanfare on any of it, Larry. If you don't go to YouTube, and most of you guys go to YouTube, there's no fanfare about it at all. And what you pointed out was it's 0.9 LD, the comet is. That's less than 1 lunar distance. And when you get within that distance, when you're that close to Earth, the gravitation of Earth has a tremendous change on the projected path.
Well, that doesn't make me feel better.
Well,
I'm just kidding. I know what you mean.
Right.
Yeah, but I think that, what I'm interested in seeing is the overall pattern of comets that are now being observed, and particularly sun grazers and sun impactors. What are the two of you guys seeing on that's different? Larry, I'll throw that one at you, then back to Jesse.
What am I saying in terms of identification of them?
Frequency, severity.
Well, I tell you what, it seems like there's a whole lot more of them. I think Jesse in his one video was, that may be touched upon later, that he was remarking how there's quite a number of them out there right now. And it's like, NASA can pick and choose the ones they want to report or casually mention on a flyby later. So I guess the answer to that, there seems to be a lot more. Then you can take that beyond, okay, now what's causing all this?
Yeah. What's causing all that? That's the good question. That one I'll throw back at you, Jesse.
Marshall, it goes back to a video, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago. I think we have 130 videos up. We've been up 7.5 weeks, but it's called a grand alignment, and you guys have talked about this too, and it goes back to the actual date of December 21st, 2012. And now we know that the Mayan ninth wave ends on the 28th from the charts that I've seen. I'm no expert in that field, but the actual alignment where the between the Earth, the Sun, and the galactic center is on December 21st, 2012, the winter equinox. And if you study that video, you will see that we are not part of the Milky Way. We are in the Milky Way, but we are a sub-galaxy of the Sagittarian galaxy. We're colliding at an opposite angle with a wing of the Milky Way. And if you remember, the scientists took a infrared telescope with cameras with it was a real high, like 20 millimeter or something, and they mapped all the stars in the Milky Way trail and in our area in the infrared spectrum. Then they put the data together and made maps. I put their map on the video called the Grand Alignment, and it's like two saw blades coming into each other at different angles. When you see the video and those images, I don't see how we're even here now. There's so much collision going on that it will blow your mind. Just take a look at that video. That's going to explain why we're having this extra bombardment, and it's also increasing what I call galactic heat or solar heat. Friction does that, and as you come closer to these objects, then they're combining heat, and so we've got multiple forces at play. But this grand alignment, I think, is the key to the whole thing. Even more so than anything else we've been looking at, Planet X, Comet Elenin? Well, no, it's the cause of all of that. Okay. You see what I'm saying? If you look at that video, Marshall, and any of you guys out there, you will be amazed at why we're even still alive. We're coming in such a stream of debris. Yeah. It's amazing. The hand of God is over us. And, you know, I would say that there's a good case to be made for that. If there's one thing that I learned is that we do have friends out there. We may not think of them in the way that we would normally think of as friends, but one of the things that really became apparent to us, especially when we were doing channeling research, was there are a lot of races out there. The only way they can connect is through this mental telepathy of sorts, and you know, they're rooting for us. But I think that there's also, you see an awful lot of these other websites out there that are talking about there's active participation. I mean, a classic one is Zeta Talk with Nancy Leader, and she's out there channeling the Zetas all the time. You know, but I mean, that's kind of hard to say. The Zetas told her Planet X would be here in 2003, and we missed the boat on that. So, you know, and I remember having her on my show, and she said, well, they did it to trick George Bush into launching the Iraq War so that it would drain the economy. And you know, the funny thing is when she said that, I mean, it was maybe back in 2004, 2005, and I remember when she said that, I was going, boy, that's a real stretch, Nancy. That's a real stretch. I'm thinking that. But, you know, it kind of played out that way, fellas. What do you think? Oh, yeah. What do you think, Larry? Oh, yeah. So, what is in terms of the Comet Elenin saga, all right, I mean, I saw, Jesse, you had on your YouTube channel, you did a video on we're going to be passing through the gas tail, and you were concerned about it because, I mean, that's a deadly toxic gas, but the question I have is there enough concentration to be a genuine concern? Well, Marshall, we don't know that. We don't know it. We just got that information a day and a half ago. I mean, they confirmed it. And so all we can do is speculate. Now, in the beginning, what they were talking about was with the blue glow as Elenin was incoming. That they can determine by the color the type of gas. And if you read back on blue and on the cyanide, that's what that comes from. Oh, yeah, no, we documented that in our video, and I will say that, Jesse, that is a legitimate concern, because when Halley's Comet passed through, I think it was 1910, that caused quite a lot of panic, because it had only been a few decades that they had the ability to do that, all right, the spectrometry. And, you know, so when they found out that Halley's Comet had hydrogen cyanide, I mean,
people were panicking. They were buying the very most early versions of gas masks in those days, comet pills. There were songs about I'm going to die when it comes, and people were having let's die with, you know, Halley's Comet songs. I mean, that's really cheerful. And so there is, you know, there was really genuine concern, but it passed by. There was no concern for us.
Marshall, some of the things that are different now, if I can point them out, is that we have the largest hole in our upper atmosphere ever recorded. Okay? Mm-hmm. The shields are down. That hole is larger than the continental United States. Last night, we had a solar blast that struck our atmosphere. On the Boulder K index registered, I think it was a 7 or maybe a 6.5, but it was a 1.5 higher than that when you looked at the final models. There were red auroras in Alabama and Mississippi. We've never seen them here before. Red indicates the strongest type. Normally you'll have your blue and green shades. Mm-hmm. Red is the strongest type of energy when it penetrates. We also had a compression of our atmosphere from it. If you'll look at the latest video I did this afternoon after the show, it's called Elenin and the Two Nephews. You'll see the compression effects. The video is from NASA. It's amazing. It's the live, 2-day-old SETI images of mm-hmm. this, and as it approached Earth, and as it approached our atmosphere, and it's what we're so. You've got that. Now, people have asked, why is this the 28th important with the alignment of Jupiter when we do it every 11 years? Well, this time, what it is, Jupiter is not in a perfect circle in its orbit. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. When it's an elliptical orbit, and the difference between its closest approach to Sun on one orbit and in the orbit now is 50 million miles. Okay? We won't be this close to Jupiter again until 2022. So you've got your solar flares, our shields are down, we've got the magnetic pull of Jupiter dealing with. Now, there's a possibility, and Phoenix 3333, one of the YouTube guys, Marshall, that I think he called in on the last show, is real sharp, and he's talking about a binary twin to our Sun, and that's why we're seeing the images as they appear on the SETI HI1 images. If you look at the reverse gray ones and the tail that's on this thing that's not visible, it makes a lot of sense to me, but our shields are down. It's our closest approach to Jupiter. We're in our solar maximum. That's why it's all different.
So that is... All right. You know,
well, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So, Jesse, do you see that as having a connection to the Mount Etna eruptions, the Turkey earthquakes? I mean, you know, for the longest time there was all this speculation that Elenin or something near it. I mean, is it a type of geomagnetic effect or something that something external though that is manifesting in what's going on the Earth?
It's a combination of things, Larry, and none of them are good. You've got, we're in our solar maximum, our shields are down. Now, you've got to understand the way the Earth heats up. When we receive energy from the Sun, we receive it as high frequency. The waves are real short and real powerful. If you look at them on a sine wave, like on an oscilloscope, they can penetrate the upper atmosphere. The Earth and the surface of the Earth, the oceans, they absorb this, and as it's released slowly in a low frequency or slow wave pattern. Now, as you build up, if you've got chemtrails, if you've got greenhouse effect, and you have heavy bombardment, it's called a global or solar equilibrium that we release at low frequency at the same rate that we receive at high frequency, and we're not doing that. So as we're heating up, the atoms inside the Earth and dealing with Elenin, especially if this thing turns out to be a variant star with a totally different magnetic field, if it is one, the density of it's going to be incredible. But we're dealing with it on that level also. So as we're dealing with Jupiter, we're dealing with solar maximum again, and this heat is exactly, the magma is rising, and if you notice in the northern hemisphere, Jupiter is in the northern hemisphere at night. It's the brightest star in the sky, and that's where our big quakes are started from Turkey, and they're coming around. It's just something to watch. We're being affected by all things at one time right now, and that's very unusual, and it's a high mark on what to watch for.
So then basically what you're saying is that under normal circumstances, hydrogen cyanide in the comet is a non-starter. But given the fact that we have this convergence of so many peculiar factors that all of a sudden now maybe it's not a showstopper, but it's something to seriously keep in mind?
Well, we don't know what the effects of the gas will be, but as Larry pointed out earlier, just like you have gas in a fluorescent light, and when you apply voltage, it will ignite. And Marshall, it always strikes me as if this thing glows in hydrogen cyanide, if you say, what would be the spark? What if we were going through the gas cloud at the same time we were receiving a solar CME, and it electrified it at that point with our shields down? Now, it may not penetrate in here, but actually the blue star is the warning sign. And what if everything in the sky actually just started glowing blue and we were having these giant auroras? I think it would open a lot of eyes, and that's a possibility. So it's not that just that it could come in and it's hydrogen cyanide and kill everybody on Earth with the gas from it. It's what are we
in other words,
it's
the show. It's the show.
It very well could be. Isn't that what you guys talk about?
Yeah, Larry, this was right up this is up your alley. Take it, man.
Hey, Jesse.
Yeah.
Let me follow up with you on this because, this is kind of deja vu for me. One of the things that we also kicked around on this, that, again, we were speculating, and I never realized how on target we could have been, is do you know if this hydrogen cyanide cloud will have a polarity? And if so, what is it?
Well, listen, today, if you'll look at the updated images, and they're on spaceweather.com, you've got to give them the credit. But from the New Mexico astronomers that took the images, again, they did them in the infrared spectrum today, and they posted those. And it is showing one side is much heavier than the other, is almost a object is still there. So the polarity will be determined on that object. But everybody should go and look at the new infrared images of that gas cloud. There's an object there that's not showing up unless you go to infrared.
How big an object?
It looks just as big as the object we're looking at on SETI, Marshall. In the gray image is the reversals as it's climbing. And today, everybody was trying to point out, and it's so strange that we can talk about earthquakes and volcanoes and everything's real good. You mention Elenin, and you get started attacked on your channel. But everybody, the attacks were coming about YU-55. And in the video that I posted before the show, it's called Elenin and the Two Nephews. We point out that it's nowhere near the track of YU-55, and it now has curved left coming back over Earth, just like Elenin would.
Hey, Jesse.
Yeah.
What do you think? I mean, I copied you on that one email, that link I got from JPL, and it showed YU-55 coming in. And it's like, amazingly, they're saying, yeah, it's coming in inside moon orbit. And it looks like it's not, I mean, it's one thing passing inside the moon orbit, but it looks like it's not passing that far from the moon. Is there a level of risk there as well, or is that unwarranted?
Well, I think, isn't it listed as 0.9 or 0.8 LD, which is less than 1 lunar distance?
Well, it's 0.85 lunar distance from YU-55 to the Earth. But what I'm saying is, if you look at that video, you'll see how when it's coming in moon orbit and then crossing back out, it's like running just behind the moon.
Right. Now,
anyway, I just thought that was a little bit close, that's all.
Well, and you're right on, because what you're going to have is all of a sudden as it gets closer, just like you have when a comet comes around the sun, it uses that to throw it back out into orbit, the gravity. Well, and so that points out that when you get an object that close incoming, the gravity of the Earth and the moon are going to change its track. And it's going to be pulled into it just like a sun-diving comet. And that's going to be just one of the things we're looking out for. That's not, I mean, it could be big. This thing is, I think, 180 meters, which is almost 2 football fields.
Hey, Jesse, is it true then that the current trajectory of the gas cloud is blowing, or if you will, across YU-55 right now in outside orbit toward the Earth? Is that true?
I don't know.
Because
I don't know
that could have like almost an effect of blowing it outward, and we don't need that much of an effect anymore. But I saw that as well, and I thought that was kind of interesting, and I looked it up, and it is in that type of trajectory, but I can't be sure. Maybe I'm wrong.
No, that's a good point. But what I'm saying is there's going to be so many things happening so fast, we're not going to be able to keep up with them. So we just
oh boy. Oh.
There's no way. I mean, we would have to have a 20-team staff on a cable news channel, live 24/7.
But it seems like an amazing congruence of events. It's almost like it's scripted. It's just weird.
Well, we're that generation, and a lot of people know what I'm saying when I say that. We're the last generation.
Hoorah.
So, you know, what can you say? That's what the Bible says.
Well, I mean, look, there's a lot of prophecy that converges on these times, and boy, that's one thing that I've seen over the years, and it was really stunning for me, especially in the early years when we were doing this, was because prophecy was the last thing I turned to. A lot of people go, prophecy first, and they start shopping around on the science. We were just trying to understand global warming, and that led us in this direction. This was a purely scientific research. And then as we started looking at not only prophecy, we went for folklore as well, all right, ancient historical accounts, and all of that stuff. I mean, those people were telling us these are the things that are going to happen in this time. One of the things they definitely always have said is that this object's going to sneak up on you. It's not going to be something that you see it coming for a long time from far away, that when this thing does show itself, it's a rather sudden appearance, and that it looks like a second sun in the sky, and it will cause a huge amount of fear and panic. Now, with that in mind, all right, looking at Comet Elenin, let's talk about the Hopi prophecy. We have the blue star Kachina, we have the red star Kachina. Everyone's heard this. I'll just be real quick about it. Blue star is the harbinger. It gives us a good shaking, but it's the red Kachina that's really going to rock and sock. And that could come, I don't know, maybe a year afterwards. But if it is the red Kachina, blue Kachina prophecy, red Kachina obviously is going to be something like Planet X, which is right now, our position is still that it could be anything. It could be a massive comet. It could be a brown dwarf in a mini constellation. You just have to be open-minded, other than to say there's things out there that are happening, and what is unquestionable is our sun is responding to it. Now, Elenin is coming close in this period of time. It's going to be passing us close by. And the Hopi prophecy is very clear. It says that the blue Kachina will unmask itself when it dances, all right? Which means we don't see it coming. All of a sudden, boom, it is there, and it's got its front stage and center. Now, given the amount of time that we have between now and, in our video, we projected that the concern on this would go until the first couple of weeks of January. So between now and the first couple of weeks of January, what I'd like for you guys to do is talk about what could actually cause Elenin, if it is the blue Kachina, to unmask, to be this big blue honking whatever in the sky that says, folks, we're in poodoo. We're in deep kimchi. There's problems. And then also, not only looking at that, but there's other prophecy, not the blue star Kachina prophecy, that talks about a house falling out of the sky. And the only one left right now is the International Space Station. Although I know the Chinese, I believe, are in the process of doing something with their own station. But all of that being said, Larry, from what you're seeing, what could trigger a sudden unmasking of a large bluish object that scares the holy living bejesus out of us?
Oh, I would just say the obvious, in that from what I've learned so far from everyone, and that if that gas could ignite or illuminate in some way, that this is again like deja vu. I had this discussion with Richard, that I asked him specifically what color would it glow. He's so detail oriented. He went blue. And I thought, oh, wow, that's kind of interesting. So, again, that could be, huge in how that would appear in the sky, considering how close it would all be. And then that starts the chain of events. If you want to go with Hopi prophecy, as we, again, discussed before, starts the chain of events as you just described, Marshall. They talk about a dwelling place in the sky will fall. And back then we even talked about, well, geez, could that be the International Space Station? Well, earlier we've talked about how there's more problems now, everything from meteorites hitting the space station, geomagnetic storms, satellites. We're talking about that. Well, again, that's in the Hopi prophecy. And then it goes on to talk about the disasters and the fire in the sky. It could be, meteors, and the CMEs. It goes on to describe that. So, I hope it doesn't play out that way, but if it does, that's how perhaps it could.
Oh, I agree with that. Now, let me give the audience out there a couple of interesting tidbits, okay? And let's talk about something called LEO. No, it's not a band from the 70s. It's low Earth orbit, all right? And low Earth orbit is an area of space above the Earth that's about anywhere from 100 to 1,200 miles approximately above the Earth. All right, exactly, it's 100 to 1,240 miles. For those of you in Europe, do your own metric conversion. Now, when we're talking about the International Space Station, it orbits, depending on where it is in its orbit, anywhere from between 173 to 286 miles above the Earth. So what you have is there's tens of millions of bits of space junk floating some 950 miles above the International Space Station. Out of that tens of millions, maybe there's 5 or 10% of that of objects that are, say about 4 inches in diameter approximately. You know, now the little ones, the itty bitty little ones, that's sandblasting. But those guys that are 4 inches in diameter, those go right through a station or a booster or whatever. They're just going to plow through it like an old cannonball. Now, we have a couple of satellites, and you know, this is really helpful because before the show, Larry, you sent me on some interesting stuff. We've had 2 satellites, Rosat, which is German, and then before that was ERS-2. One was the size of a bus, one was the size of a minibus. I love these precise distinctions. And but both of these things came crashing down. Now, I was watching CNN when they were talking about the Rosat coming down, and I never saw anybody trying to go ha 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 so hard, and meanwhile inside they're going, what the heck am I seeing? All right, and these 2 gals that are announcing this, and I mean, it's like they're putting on the face. I mean, I work with CNN, and I understand how it's done, and they're going through the headsets, and they're going, put a happy face on it, fluff it up, fluff it up, fluff it up, and that's what they did, and they're ha, 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 oh, another satellite fell out of the sky, ha, 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 boy, that happens, it's like, and they're doing this nonsense, and I see them do that so often. I remember when the volcano in Iceland that shut down air traffic off through the whole northern hemisphere, when it popped off, the guy on CNN was going, we're going to have beautiful sunsets. Like, right. Go tell that to everybody stranded in, you know, in the airports, can't get a flight home, you know, to ask them about the sunset. So we get this happy nonsense, all right? But we've got a lot of junk up in space, tens of millions of pieces, anything from the size of a grain of sand all the way up to big honking boosters and whatnot. And the space station has got most of all of that junk on top of it.
Hey, Marshall, is that still manned right now?
It is still manned. And, you know, what they said was that they were planning to possibly de-man the station in November. Then they came back and said, well, maybe December and this and that and fidget and fart and fidget and, you know, whatever, they're going back and forth. It hasn't been demanded yet, although I think when the time comes, everybody's going to scramble for the Soyuz capsules, and that's it, you know. We're bailing out. Goodbye. But we got this comet coming in. Let's kind of pull these other facts. It's loaded with hydrogen cyanide, which means it turns into a big blue flash bulb that goes off, possibly, if it ignites. Plus, we've got a weakened magnetosphere. Plus, we've got all of this increased solar activity. And we've already had a whole lot of stuff that's fallen out of the sky, a couple of huge satellites, namely. And, I mean, even the smaller one, you know, it had a 1-ton reflector dish, which would definitely make it through the atmosphere and hit the Earth somewhere. And so, you know, they're all, gee, you know, we're lucky. Isn't it nice that 70% of the surface is water? You know, I'm sorry, this is just not the kind of game I like to play. But with all of this, I want you guys to walk me through a possible scenario between now and the end of this year where events will compile, come together, converge, and we could see an unplanned deorbit of the ISS, the International Space Station, just on a guesstimate, guys. And
Marshall, let me address a question that Larry brought up about how the possible ignition of the gas that may cause the blue star Ticino. Now,
you got my underlay?
Okay. Now, just picture this in your mind. The Earth is passing through just maybe the tail end of the gas cloud, right? Just close enough for ignition point. And then you have an object. It may not be YU-55. It could be any asteroid. There's actually a layered JPL model in our favorites that puts multiple objects right around us right now, 20 or 30 that are right in our close proximity. All right, now here, the Earth is going through the tail end of the gas cloud. You have a meteorite come into our atmosphere. At the same time, you've got a solar blast. And what causes gas to ignite? A spark, right?
Mm-hmm.
A falling star, a falling asteroid. What if it was the space station that had been disabled, and as it burns through the atmosphere, that's the spark as we pass through the gas tail that ignites it, and you see your blue star. You see,
wow.
So you can tie in your falling house, your blue star. Now, I want to ask you two guys something. On the last video, now, I'm not an expert in Hopi, but I have studied it. I've studied the Indian religions, and they're talking about the 28th of this coming 28th being a day of great spiritual awakening. It's the end of the Mayan ninth wave. Now, they talk about two nephews, and that's stuck in my mind, and there's two objects trailing Elenin that I'm pointing out on our videos. It's on the red sketchy images. They're parallel, and they're coming towards Earth, and they're coming fast. Now, what do y'all know about the nephews? Are you familiar with that part of the legend? I know you are.
Well, actually,
what are the names, Jesse, of the
no
two
one's
objects?
naming them. And look, Larry, no one's naming them, and so what I've learned to do is throw out what I feel inside, and I'll either get shut down or I'll get informed. But
no,
so
because
many people
Marshall
will start
described
thinking,
this, in fairness, in his Hopi Blue Star video. Marshall?
Yeah, no, actually there was, now this was tracking that went back some months ago.
I'm tracking them right now as we speak.
You're tracking
them now as we speak.
But these were also, there were objects in the video that are moving in parallel. And I thought that the Hopi word nephews was very, very an interesting use of word. Because nephew is like an extended family member. You're kind of related, but you're not living together, kind of a thing.
But he's bringing them with him, right? They're coming together, right?
They're coming. Well, they're coming together. They're on track. All right.
Right.
And so you actually see them in the imagery from this older imagery. It's in the video. Can't remember exactly the date offhand, but you see these images moving in parallel. So, yes, LNN it's well documented that it has.
They're in the last
travel.
video I did just before the show, Marshall. I put those images in there as well as what I think is LNN, and I put the video latest from NASA of the nephews.
Okay, now I have one thing. It was something interesting that a Seeker 2 was just, it wasn't a question in the virtual chat room, but I thought it was a good point that he made. And he said a maser in a comet would not be focused energy, would be mass, but not one in one direction only. Comet Holmes massed, and the color would be blue, as Holmes was. So what about Seekers 2 talking about this as a maser effect?
That it could be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Hey, listen, Marshall, one of the guys that called in on the show, and I talk about him quite a bit because he's so sharp, his name is Phoenix 3333, talking about being a binary star twin to our sun. And when you start dealing with that mass, you're talking on the level of laser. And if anybody will look at the last images of SOHO today, in an Earth projected pattern, it's one of the, we've had these giant shock concussions of these CMEs that just penetrate the entire solar system. The last one today looked like a laser beam directed. If you're looking at stereo A, it's Earth directed. Now it may just be a glancing blow, but when you first see it and if you step it through, it looks like a laser light. It's amazing that you said that.
So Seeker 2 really hit something on the nail there.
Well, it appears that this object that we're tracking has an unusual effect on the sun as an energy directing. In other words, they have something more than just a planet and the sun would have as far as your electromagnetic gravitational pull. When you go to the frequent highest level of light into your laser spectrum, then you're talking about immense power. And when we're going through an outer alignment, I think around, November 22nd, 23rd, I'll have to look on the models if they're correct, then the Earth would be directly in that beam, just as it was on March 15th when we had the Tokyo quake.
Okay.
Excuse me, the Japan quake.
Right. Well then, all right, we have two threat scenarios here. One is we have dust tail, and the other is gas tail. And I'll say, you know, in the video, I remember, you know, when we were chatting about it, and Ed and I just didn't see it as a concern. However, you just now raised some excellent points. I mean, there's a lot of different things that are happening. That, you know, it's what if you have a bullet and you have a cartridge case, but you don't have a primer, you don't have something that works. Put a primer on it, and now you got a deadly bullet. And so
primers going around right now.
Plenty of stuff that could prime it, fire it off. So, are you saying then that you know, this period of time we're passing through the gas tail is we could see a celestial event in terms of we could see something lighting up and maybe the International Space Station getting clipped pretty bad?
Well, what we're doing, we're having to speculate, Marshall, because
of course,
the tools that our taxes are paying for, we're not given privy to. So we have to speculate. But when you put as many minds as we've got working on this now, everybody's not going to be wrong. And
yeah,
what
right.
happens
and
is
Jesse, Marshall, if I could add, I mean, we're talking about a celestial aspect right now. While we sit on a rock hurtling through space that is having tremendous earthquakes, volcanic activity that could spawn one of the biggest tsunamis in history from La Palma and the Canary Islands. I mean, we have all these other things going on. Like, even if we didn't have all these other celestial concerns, it's like, okay, we got enough cooking. You know, it's kind of almost like, you know, pick your poison, which iron in the fire. It's amazing, as Jesse put it earlier, that we're still here. I keep thinking of that, Jesse.
But you know what amazes me, guys, is how many people still say, well, I don't see what you're talking about. You know, I mean, it's like, do you pick up a paper? Do you read? But then on the other hand, I understand, because the coverage of this stuff in the corporate media is it's a very weak dribble at most, and when they do it, they tend to be very dismissive, and they poo-poo it. And I agree with you, Jesse. I mean, it's just really frustrating that, you know, we get stuck with the check, but we don't get the steak.
Well, Marshall, you know what the irony in the humor in the situation is?
There's humor, if there is. Start with that.
There is. There actually is. And
there is.
And the first part is everybody relax. God is in control. The second part is that we've talked about the different rays of the sun and how they can affect DNA structure.
Right.
All right. Now we've talked about that possibly in the ancient Sumerian text with the Anunnaki, that they did some DNA changes in order to manipulate man into doing their good. I mean, doing their bid, if it was searching for gold or digging gold or whatever. Well, now I'll say the people or the powers that be have spent all of our money and dug these great big bunkers. They're underground as this light comes through, and our DNA is changed, and we are spiritually awakened. The funny part is, we talked about it on the channel today, is they could come out of the hole if they're not trapped by earthquakes in their own doom and not be enlightened, and we'd have to open up one of the FEMA camps for the slope class because they would not be where we were at. It would have backfired. You know, that's just a thought.
No, I think it's a good thought. I saw it. You know, I mean, it's in my book, Crossing the Cusp, I talk about this. I think the only way the elites can survive it is during the worst of it, they're going to have to be under heavy sedation, you know.
Hey, Jesse and Marshall, you know, I went through this Hopi thing pretty deep. And if you recall, in the verbiage in their text, it talks about those that survive will do it in a spiritual manner, and that those that seek physical shelter will not survive. They actually come out and say that. I thought it was kind of interesting. What an interesting way to approach such a calamity. You know, a spiritual salvation.
The Bible says that we'll be changed in the twinkle of an eye, and
in the
we'll
Hopi
be wishing
prophecy,
for the mountains to fall upon them.
It refers to a spiritual survival versus a physical one.
That's exactly right, and that's why if you're underground and you don't experience that, if it is a light-changing event that God is going to do it with, and you're not there, then it just backfired on you, and so be it.
Yeah, I agree with that, Jesse. And Marshall, we talked about this earlier with the neutrinos changing the aspect of DNA. Remember that months ago on that show?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, this could do what Jesse says, but Jesse, I think you're bordering into the realm of religious, and excuse me if I can be blunt, some degree of religious dogma is saying that those underground would not be enlightened because of lack of the bombardment. I can see how that physically might be true, But I think that is kind of like severe speculation.
It is severe, but when you're dealing with the unknown,
Jesse,
then it could be a possibility. Is what I'm saying.
Yeah,
it is speculation.
Guys, let me jump in here. Let me jump in.
Okay.
All right. I don't think it's speculation, Jesse. It's history. Let me explain to you. I published the Colburn Bible, and this is the reason why we found this book. And you know, my expression, destiny comes to those who listen. You know, if you're just telling the universe, throw me a bone, I'm going this way, it usually does. We were vetting Zecharia Sitchin, all right? And when I first came to it, it was like, well, it's translation, it's ancient Sumerians, give me some hard data. And, you know, the answer came back, shut up and read it, all right? And that was from my other researchers. So we're doing it. I said, well, if we're going to take Sitchin seriously, we have to corroborate it. There has to be some other folklore besides Sumerian that has detailed accounts of this object. The Egyptians and the Hebrews. You read the Old Testament, the first 5 books, that's the Torah, the Tanakh, and you read the Torah, and it is describing an object called the Destroyer. The Egyptians called it the same thing, the Destroyer. Now, depends on which eschatology of Christianity and which book, Bible you're going to buy and the translation in it. Some of them will translate it to Destroyer, others will use other terms, but it is Destroyer. The Egyptians call it that very clearly. Now, here's what they said, is that the process is what they labeled the Great Winnowing. And I described this in real depth in Crossing the Cusp. And I was very impressed by what the ancient Egyptians were saying, because they said the folks that survived this, very specifically, the stout-hearted will not go down to destruction. All right? And it takes moral fiber to survive it, because they say that it causes so much fear that women become infertile, men become impotent. In other words, we stop reproducing. I don't know about women. For guys, we really got to be scared before we stop thinking about that.
Real scared.
And real scared, okay? Super scared. But the other thing it says is that they just drop like flies. The people, literally, the fear wells up in them so badly that they just die from the fright. Now, the funny thing was I got corroboration with that. We did a whole lot of research with channeling different sensitives, different entities, and we had a protocol. We tested on, we vetted them, and we had vetted sources. And our process was very simple. We said, give us, you know, an event, a weather event 6 months out. And they were just like nailing it every time. They'd say, yeah, you're going to have a typhoon. It's going to go this way, then it's going to go that way. Sure enough, exactly when, where, what they were saying, or here's your hurricane season for next year. Exactly the way it played out. You know, it just stunned us when we would go back into our research notes, and there was our vetting data, and that, you know, the call was made. So you can find somebody that's that accurate on television to forecast an event 6 to 12 months out. I sure would love to know so I can tune in. But the thing here is that these guides were very clear. What they told us, and it wasn't 1 or 2 or whatever. I mean, we heard this again and again. We didn't look for, one of the things in the protocol, no one single voice was omnipotent. Somebody says, I'm the only answer, we say, and, you know, we know where the door is. Bye. The other one was, we look for trends, all right? Not specifics. And what we're specifically with trends, we wanted what we call the drum beats, things that kept coming up again and again and again and again. I don't care how they explained it, but they always were talking to the same exact thing. And then the third thing we did was we used cross-reference questions to make sure that we didn't have channel filtering from the sensitives, because maybe they were just, you know, didn't want to relay some of the information that they were getting, or they would change it a little bit. That usually happens when it's like, Uncle Harry didn't bury the money in his backyard. He spent it. What? I'm going to kill you. You know, people freak out when they get the bad news. What they said when we asked them about, what about the deep underground military bases? Oh, they know all about that. All right. And they said, they're not going to do any better under the surface than you are above the surface. A lot of those deep underground bases are going to be crushed because of a pole shift. Exactly. And so they were, when they designed all of those bases, what they were really worried about, and which is the principal threat, which is solar, all right? huge solar storms. You want to see what that looks like? Go rent a copy of Knowing with Nicolas Cage and just skip right to the end of the movie. Trust me, that'll wake you up. And they were just saying, look, a lot of them, they're just going to get ground to pieces, all right? And so they're not going to do very well, but they're not going to be, they're not going to disappear either. Right. There's a bunch of us going to survive. There's some of them that are going to survive. I can tell you that the elites are already laying plans for maintaining control in the post-historic world.
But you'd have to be underground to survive the solar.
You have to be underground to survive the solar.
In the physical. In the physical.
So,
and it may be more than just the physical we're dealing with. And that's biblical. It goes into the Hindu, the Mayan, the Egyptian religion. I'm a Christian by faith, and I deal with the Bible, but I never close my eyes to the rest of the world. I collect data. And if you use the knowledge that God gives you, you can discern when someone's giving you, when they're trying to shoot it to you. You can tell. God gives you a discernment that will allow you to filter. But there's things in every religion in this world that you need to know. And when you put them all together, you come up with a plus sum.
Yeah, Jesse, I know, and without, going down this road of religion, I was raised a Baptist, very strong religious upbringing. But as I grow older and read and learn more, I realize how things often are not as they appear and are often far more revolutionary than what may have been in the Bible, like whether there were books left out, whatever. But, I mean, this universe is truly remarkable, way beyond, my imagination or what I was taught growing up and, in religion. So sometimes when certain things are dictated to happen or around something else, I don't want to say I don't believe it, but I'm just saying, yes, I heard it, and I like to stick more to a science aspect of it.
Well, I always go to science first, and not first, but I always go to science because it makes it easier for me to explain to other people what's going on. But I go to God first because he's never been wrong, Larry.
And that's why you have the credibility you do online.
Well, I'm just saying that, I would never, I've been wrong, but I would never intentionally mislead anybody. But I do go to God first. But when I was in college, I studied world religion. I read the Bhagavad Gita, the Hindu Bible, and different religions from around the world, and I gained a great amount of knowledge from all of them.
Okay, Jesse, then let me ask.
God created the universe that we're studying, Larry. And
but do you believe that aliens created us?
Yeah, but God says in the Bible, it is an honor for man to study my mysteries. So
you buy into that aliens created us?
No, I said God created us.
Well,
I'm not saying that there was not a DNA interference in the process. Okay, I'm not saying that.
That's
but
fair.
I'm saying God created us initially.
Well, God creates everything, and yes, what was a DNA manipulation to make us.
But I am a science head now, and I love it, and I always have, and I always go there first, and it gives you documentation in both hands.
Well, I think we as a species are part alien. We are aliens. I mean, I tell you what, if you boys ever really experienced gold fever, I had it. When I was a young man, I knew what gold fever was like.
I know where you're going.
And I'm telling you something. I do not know how it is that we as a species could have, come from apes and this, that, and the other thing. We don't think of bananas more favorably than gold over bananas, all right? I've had the gold fever, and it's very unnatural, and it's very intoxicating. I mean, it's more powerful than sex drive. Now, that is something that has to be engineered in. So, yeah, I do put some credence in the whole theory that we do have extraterrestrial involvement, but I don't give a damn about all of that. Because it's here, it's now, it's our planet, we're working the claim, okay?
Yeah,
that's
right.
it.
Yeah, but Marshall, I bring it up if what's happening is within the context of something else,
Yeah, and so, I mean, this just raises all the questions, and I think, we're at the top of this hour now, guys, and so this is when I usually give everybody a little bit of music so I can put on the tea and throw the cat out. And what I'm going to do tonight, since I'm running the screening room by myself, folks, is I'm going to play Lives in the Balance again. just am addicted to that song now. And John Snardo sent it in to me, and it's like I got it on my desktop, and I'm playing it all the time. The lyrics just touch me so deep. But for those of you that like to come on and talk with Jesse and Larry, the guest call-in number is 818-495-6962. That's and Jesse, and then I'll go to you, Larry.
Well, we did a video yesterday, Marshall, about the update. We had started tracking. What was strange about it is after the show last weekend on the 18th, some of our YouTubers immediately noticed the object coming in on our stereo A images from SETI with the naval satellite.
Right.
So we did an update. We have been updating it since the 18th. So in New Mexico, we had two astrologers on the 22nd decide to break out their telescopes, and they did 2-day imaging from the 22nd and the 23rd there.
Jesse, is that astrologers or astronomers?
Excuse me, Marshall. It's been a long day. It's astronomers. Excuse me. Thank you for.
That's how you pronounce it.
Look, keep me straightened out. Things are happening so fast. Yeah, exactly. Two astronomers. Now, and what they did was they did 2 days of snapshots so they could compare movement. And that's how you do it. You have to compile the images and look at the change in motion with the star field behind you. And what they did was detect a gas cloud. And they put it up on Space Weather. We put a video up about it. And they showed the movement of the gas cloud. It had the blue halo in it. And it was tracking with the JPL model. And so they determined that it was the remnants of Elenin. And so, but now the object we're tracking on stereo on the A satellite actually has it's not just a gas cloud. It has a interior solid mass. And what they did today was come back with those same images in the infrared spectrum, Marshall, and it was showing that the gas cloud was short on one end and fat on the other, just like the wingtip of a plane, like you would see. In other words, it was tapering back from one end. So it's detecting there is an object there. And so we're tracking, keeping that updated, and it's right there. You can go and look at it for yourself.
All right. All right. And Larry Prescott, the LNN research team, and Larry, I know you and Ed have really been busy with chit-chat and following on all this. What have you got?
Well, I think this is interesting in that it reckons back to when I worked with Ed and Richard, and we were all talking and predicting about this gas and the type of gas that was going to be around Elenin. And I believe it was Richard or Ed pointed out that it was going to be hydrogen cyanide. Do you remember that? Mm-hmm. And anyway, and so now, and then I'm looking at Jesse's video, and he's saying the same thing. He's pointing out the hydrogen cyanide. Jesse, I don't know if you knew that when we were all talking about this back then, but I find it interesting now that that's
where I got the information from, Larry.
Well, very nice, thank you. But anyway, it's kind of cool to see that in one sense come to pass. And now the other thing, it's kind of interesting to see if it happens, is what Jesse was referring to in the the electrical nature of it. That how if it could illuminate, not necessarily a big explosion, but an illumination. And I'm just kind of curious if that might be a bright blue. But again, we'll see. But the most interesting thing I want to throw out real quick, guys, is that I just find it so interesting that on November 8th, that asteroid comes within, what, 200,000 miles of Earth, like within the moon orbit, and just kind of like no fanfare or whatever. YU-55?
There's not much fanfare on any of it, Larry. If you don't go to YouTube, and most of you guys are go to YouTube, there's no fanfare about it at all. And what you pointed out was it's 0.9 LD, the comet is. That's less than 1 lunar distance. And when you get within that distance, when you're that close to Earth, the gravitation of Earth has a tremendous change on the projected path.
Well, that doesn't make me feel better.
Well,
I'm just kidding. I know what you mean.
Right.
Yeah, but I think that, what I'm interested in seeing is the overall pattern of comets that are now being observed, and particularly sun grazers and sun impactors. What are the two of you guys seeing on that that's different? Larry, I'll throw that one at you, and then back to Jesse.
What am I saying in terms of identification of them?
Frequency, severity.
Well, I tell you what, it seems like
trends.
there's a whole lot more of them. I think Jesse in his one video was, that may be touched upon later, that he was remarking how there's quite a number of them out there right now. And it's like, NASA can pick and choose the ones they want to report or casually mention on a flyby later. So I guess the answer to that, there seems to be a lot more. Then you can take that beyond, okay, now what's causing all this?
Yeah. What's causing all that? That's the good question. That one I'll throw back at you, Jesse.
Marshall, it goes back to a video, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago. I think we have 130 videos. We've been up 7.5 weeks. But it's called the Grand Alignment. And you guys have talked about this too. And it goes back to the actual date of December 21st, 2012. And now we know that the Mayan ninth wave ends on the 28th from the charts that I've seen. I'm no expert in that field. But the actual alignment where between the Earth, the Sun, and the galactic center is on December 21st, 2012, the winter equinox. And if you study that video, you will see that we are not part of the Milky Way. We are in the Milky Way, but we are a sub-galaxy of the Sagittarian galaxy. We're colliding at an opposite angle with a wing of the Milky Way. And if you remember, the scientists took a infrared telescope with cameras with it was a real high, like 20 millimeter or something, and they mapped all the stars in the Milky Way trail and in our area in the infrared spectrum. Then they put the data together and made maps. I put their map on the video called the Grand Alignment, and it's like two saw blades coming into each other at different angles. When you see the video and those images, I don't see how we're even here now. There's so much collision going on that it will blow your mind. Just take a look at that video. That's going to explain why we're having this extra bombardment, and it's also increasing what I call galactic heat or solar heat. Friction does that, and as you come closer to these objects, then they're combining heat, so we've got multiple forces at play. But this grand alignment, I think, is the key to the whole thing. Even more so than anything else we've been looking at, Planet X, Comet LNM? Well, no, it's the cause of all of that. Okay. You see what I'm saying? If you look at that video, Marshall, and any of you guys out there, you will be amazed at why we're even still alive. We're coming in such a stream of debris. Yeah. It's amazing. The hand of God is over us. And, I would say that there's a good case to be made for that. If there's one thing that I learned is that we do have friends out there. We may not think of them in the way that we would